a surprising but positive new announcement from Labour. The party has confirmed it will block all new domestic oil and gas developments if it gets into government. In the words of Drake, no new oil, no, no, no. Reports first surfaced over the weekend that Keir Starmer would formally set out the plans next month as part of his net zero energy strategy. The leaked policy also includes a commitment that any borrowing for investment would be restricted for green energy schemes. A Labour source sketched out the broad outline of the plans in The Times. We are against the granting of new licences for oil and gas in the North Sea. Will do nothing to cut bills, as the Tories have acknowledged. They undermine our energy security and would drive our coach and horse through our climate targets. But Labour would continue to use existing oil and gas wells over the coming decades and manage them sustainably as we transform the UK into a clean energy superpower. Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, confirmed reports while doing the media rounds on Sunday.
The report that Keir Starmer wants to stop all new oil and gas exploration. Is that true?
Well, what we'll be doing in our coming weeks is outlining how we want to invest in the green jobs of the future to bring bills down, to create a more sustainable energy supply. We'll be outlining that in a significant mission in the coming weeks, and we'll be announcing more details then. But we know we've got to move to more renewable sources of energy. It's important for our climate change commitments, but it's also the way in which we can bring energy bills down for consumers.
Okay, that's interesting. Sounds very much like a yes, Mr. Ashworth. And if you do stop all new oil and gas exploration, with old fields being shut down, where does that leave your celebrated windfall tax, number one? And number two, doesn't that mean that you're going to ask Britain to rely in the transition to net zero, next 30 years or so, on supplies from other sources, for example, Qatar, perhaps even Russia again?
No, this isn't about shutting down what's going on at the moment. We will manage those sustainably. We do think a windfall tax can be applied.
They're shut themselves down. They're not inexhaustible. If you stop all new exploration, you are going to have to fill the gap from somewhere, and it won't all come from wind. We know that. The sums have been done. So where's it going to come from?
It's a mischaracterisation to say our policy is all from wind. We think we need to invest in, yes, we do need to invest in wind, we need to invest in tidal, we need to invest in nuclear. We need more sustainable sources of energy supply in order to bring bills down for consumers and actually create jobs in this green transition. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs that will come online from a transition to low carbon industries and technologies, not just directly in the energy sector, but associated jobs in manufacturing, in design, in engineering. We should be a world leader in this. And one of the things that I want to do in the way in which I reform welfare, reform the job centres, is prepare our workforce for the next wave of jobs which is coming, the next set of opportunities, so that we are ready for these high-skilled jobs of the future.
Isn't it fascinating to see that Trevor Phillips, instead of maybe asking questions about the details of the policy or, how we will become a clean energy superpower with a privatised energy system, or what it actually means with these no oil and gas developments, instead scaremongering by saying that stopping new oil and gas development projects means we'll be going cap in hand back to Qatar or Russia. We have to admire our neutral, objective and rigorous British media, don't we? Now, this floated policy has been greeted with praise by climate campaigners, but as you saw there, the right-wing media have been going absolutely tonto. The Telegraph ran a hysterical editorial accusing Keir Starmer of being a, quote, cheerleader for a, quote, tiny, tiresome pressure group. Yep, you guessed it, they're talking about Just Stop Oil. The Times also followed up their initial reporting with an article relishing in the, quote, fury of industry leaders in the northeast of Scotland in response to the proposals. They said this: industry, business and political leaders in the northeast of Scotland have unleashed a scathing attack on Sir Keir Starmer's quote, deeply unserious plans to block new oil and gas developments in the North Sea. The UK Labour leader will next month outline a dramatic, quote, national mission to slash reliance on fossil fuels. This will include a ban on all new licences for oil and gas. Energy and business lobbies in Aberdeen and across the north of Scotland have said they accept the need to end reliance on hydrocarbons, but want a gradual transition to renewables. Not even in government yet. The gradual transition will happen. But do you know what is really deeply, deeply unserious? Prioritising profit over the climate emergency. A reminder, back in 2021, the world's leading energy organisation, the International Energy Agency, said that new oil and gas fields must stop that year, 2021, if the world was to meet its net zero emissions goals. Guess what? That didn't happen. And now we're getting headlines like this. We can't escape the reality. France is preparing for 4 degrees Celsius of warming by 2100. There was also an intervention on Starmer's plans from GMB, Britain's largest manufacturing union and one of Labour's biggest donors. GMB's General Secretary Gary Smith isn't best pleased about the crackdown on new oil and gas field licences that once again has only been proposed. He told the Financial Times that there was a national security imperative to keep Britain's oil and gas industry alive, as it's still part of the government's Net Zero 2050 plan. He added, it would be self-defeating not to maximise extraction from our own oil and gas, and that's going to be a difficult debate, but it's one we'll have to face down. There's ethics involved. Are we going to keep funding these regimes in the Middle East or the likes of Russia, or do we take responsibility for our own carbon and create jobs and investment here? There's no point strangling the industry. We need to work with the industry to encourage investment in the green technologies of the future. Funny. Very funny. Because here is Gary Smith in 2021 in a statement released alongside GMB's special report on energy and environment. Climate change is real, the climate emergency is happening, but the debate over energy and environmental policy must go hand in hand, and over the last decade, it has been mired in political and industrial failure. There's a huge gulf between our climate change ambitions and delivery. We export to the rest of the world the jobs we need to support a recovery and transition to a low-carbon economy, and we give billions of pounds in subsidies for big energy to do it. That's unjust, wrong, and as a union of jobs and work, we make no apologies for calling that out. Time isn't on our side, but it's not too late to fix this. An energy-sufficient and socially prosperous country is entirely compatible with saving the planet, but only if we start taking our responsibilities seriously by planning and investing in the future now. 2 years ago, GMB were all in for a Green New Deal. Dahlia, what has changed?
It's hard to say because the chances are is that there's factional battles within the GMB that will shape what their policy or their position on these things are. I do think that it does go to show how our political imagination can change, in this case for the worse, so dramatically. I think for me, at this point in 2023, anyone who is trying to keep open an oil field and to recommission oil and gas projects is completely discredited. The idea of evoking ethics in this context is completely laughable, given that the climate emergency is a threat to the lives and livelihoods of the vast majority of people on this planet, particularly the people who are economically and socially and politically marginalized. So you can't really, there's no ethical case for reopening or recommissioning an oil and gas field here or anywhere else. I do think, though, that there is a really important point to be made here, particularly when we look at this from the perspective of, say, the GMB, who was talking about, jobs, for example, there. Despite this being a good step forward from Keir Starmer, what we aren't seeing now that we perhaps did see a few years ago from the Labour Party was a detailed industrial strategy that laid out and fully costed and put timescales on exactly how people working in oil and gas in Britain, both offshore and onshore, will be transitioned into better, well-unionized, high-quality jobs in the green sector. I think in this country in particular, there's good reason that the unions feel anxious and feel mistrusting of the government when it comes to big industrial changes. Obviously, deindustrialization, the closing of the mines was a big example of, this big kind of shift in the political economy of the country and the industrial strategy of the country. And what you had was these industries that communities had built their livelihoods around being closed, and there being nothing in the way of making sure that those communities were still supported. They were abandoned. There was an organized abandonment of communities that had relied on the mines. And I think there's legitimate fear that as we shift towards a decarbonized economy, the same thing might happen again if it's done in an unmanaged way and in a way that doesn't have justice at its heart. And so for me, I wonder if some of this pushback now is coming from the fact that we don't have a Labour leadership that is actively engaged in the unions, particularly the union rank and file, that is actively engaged in economic justice and climate justice movements, and has put the policy thinking towards creating an industrial strategy that could sustainably transition workers into a decarbonized economy. These really shouldn't be polarized issues. You know, I think there was a survey by Platform of workers in offshore oil and gas in the North Sea, and they found that 80% of workers would consider moving to an industry outside of oil and gas. And it's understandable, because a lot of these jobs that we're talking about protecting are actually really bad jobs. They're really dangerous. They're really precarious. The wages are falling. They're not high quality jobs. And so there's really a lot of synergy between a climate justice and economic justice lens that would transition workers into a green economy, good jobs, well unionized jobs. A lot of those workers in oil and gas have really important technical expertise that we need in a just transition. And I think they need that security and that faith. You know, the Labour Party needs to build the deep policy framework and the trust of the unions to ensure that this won't just be a wave of abandonment of workers. And unfortunately, despite this policy being good, Starmer has a bad track record on building deep policy and also building trust. And so I wonder if that shift in attitude is why we've also seen a shift in GMB's approach as well. But obviously, I'm sure that there's a lot of internal politicking going on in the GMB that will also explain this, step backwards when it comes to climate policy.